Here's where I've a shameful confession to make. I had heard talk about this thing called Passive House, and it really didn't resonate with me initially. I thought that by doing this course, I would find a better way of bringing energy efficiency into the Irish construction industry. It took probably 2 or 3 years from that intention for me to come right full circle and to realize, wow, these Passive House guys really knew what they were talking about.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand. I'm joined this week by Zach Semke. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. How are things in Seattle?
They are good. At the time of recording, it's like 65 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's on the cool side, but we've had a beautiful summer. It's great.
Nice. And we've also got Mary James joining us again today. How are you, Mary?
Excellent. We're also on the cool side, our summer has been, which is delightful.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to heading off to find some snow next weekend. It's been very cold down in the South Island here in New Zealand, and had a reasonable dumping of snow down there. So looking forward to making the most of a relatively cool winter and getting into some snow sports. But we've got a great interview to get into this week. Really looking forward to heading over to Ireland to hear about what's going on over there with Stephen O'Shea. But before we do that, we've got some people to thank, Zach.
Indeed. First, I want to thank our sponsor of the week, Source 2050, for supporting all of the work that we're doing here at Passive House Accelerator, including this episode of the Passive House podcast. And a big thank you to our stakeholder partner as well, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Thacro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump straight into it because there's a bit of an intro here as to the background of Stephen and Cairn Homes. So we'll jump in again and have a chat afterwards.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Mary James, and I'm here today with Stephen O'Shea, Head of Sustainable Construction and Reporting with Cairn Homes, one of Ireland's biggest home builders. Stephen, could you please start by giving us some background about Cairn Homes, how long it's been in existence, and what exactly it does?
Yeah, so Cairn Homes, we're celebrating our 10th birthday this year. It's a company that was launched in 2015, very much coming out of the back of the global financial crash, and at a time when there really wasn't much activity in the construction industry in Ireland or in much of the world. There was a few people with a really good long-term vision for how they might be able to build a scaled home builder from a point in the industry where there didn't seem to be much hope. They had the vision to say, no, if we go at this right and we finance this company correctly, that we can really do things at an impressive scale and pace and really make a difference.
Well, that's exciting to have. I didn't realize that you guys had been in existence just for 10 years because, again, I had heard you were one of Ireland's biggest home builders, which seems hard to establish within 10 years. And as I understand it, your developments are generally larger scale housing developments. Is that correct? But you also perhaps do some commercial buildings?
We're very much a home builder. That's how we describe ourselves. We do small amounts of commercial, but really only enough to be able to build the kind of mixed use developments that we want to build. We're very residentially focused. We need to put in amenities to support the residents and for the benefit of the residents, but they're very much a byproduct of the homes that we're building.
And your focus there is on building developments. Is that correct? It's not individual custom homes.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. I think I can only think of one or two developments off the top of my head in the time that I've been in Cairn, which have been less than 100 units. Really from 100 or even 200 units up is the kind of market that we like to be in. It's large scale developments. It's where we find we can really bring efficiencies to bear on the sites, on the developments. We can afford, with those kinds of numbers, you can staff and resource the project properly and really make it run as smoothly as you can and as efficiently as you can.
Great. And how long is it that you've been with Cairn?
I'm here just about 3.5 years now. I'm an architect by background. I have, well over 20 years experience in consultancy under my belt. And starting in kind of 2017, 2018, I started doing a postgraduate in energy efficiency in design. And as part of that, it's never an easy thing to do, to take on that kind of third level qualification when you're working full time. And I started to think, as I was going through the process, what can I do with this new knowledge? What can I do with this qualification that's going to make the effort worthwhile? And I figured if I could get onto the client side of the equation, to where the decisions were being made at early stages in developments, that I could maybe start to steer the ship in a slightly different direction. And okay, I was prepared that doing so might take a while, or there might be a bit of effort involved in getting those sorts of decisions made. But at least if you got into the right company, if you got the correct decisions made once, then that would then be multiplied over and over again across multiple units and multiple developments, and you could really start to compound the change then. And for me, then the big surprise was when I came into Cairn and rolled up my sleeves and prepared myself for this big fight that it was going to take. It really, it was pushing an open door. They were very open and very receptive to these kind of ideas, and even some of the things I was suggesting, they were saying, "Oh yeah, we've thought about that," and so on and so forth. Yeah, it wasn't quite the struggle that I maybe anticipated it was going to be.
And when you say that you were studying energy efficiency in your postgraduate work, did you come across Passive House then? Was that part of the curriculum, or how did you become interested in Passive House?
Okay, here's where I've a shameful confession to make. One of the reasons I embarked on the course was I had heard talk about this thing called Passive House, and it really didn't resonate with me initially. And I thought that by doing this course, I would find a better way of bringing energy efficiency into the Irish construction industry. So it took probably 2 or 3 years from that intention for me to come right full circle and to realize, wow, these Passive House guys really knew what they were talking about. They've worked all this stuff out well in advance. So yeah, it was through that course. It was a great course that I did in the Technological University in Dublin. And it was a sort of a broad and shallow course, as in it touched on a lot of subjects. It touched on Passive House. It touched on European regulations, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. It touched on thermal modeling. It touched on hydrothermal risk analysis. It touched on retrofit. It really did. It spanned the spectrum. And then in the third year, which I didn't go on to do, but in the third year, then if you go to do the full master's, you can then choose one of those strands, or to bring all those strands together into a single really deep dive project. Yeah, I thought the structure of the course was great. So I did encounter one of the modules was on Passive House. So we got into PHPP, we got into the mathematics of it. And one of the things then really that resonated with me was I could see that if you put the time and the effort into refining your detailing and refining your thermal bridge junctions, again, when you apply those at scale, it's worth putting the time in to get it right the first time, because you know you're going to use it then 1,000 times over. And that was when I started to really see that Passive House really, I don't know whether the right word is rewards or supports that kind of iteration and repetition. There's a huge payoff then at the back end.
I'm just curious whether I know in the UK that what has been convincing to many has been looking at the actual performance of buildings versus the model performance, and that the difference between model performance using the PHPP and actual outcomes versus other energy ratings or energy modeling tools in the UK is what convinced many there to take a closer look at Passive House, because of the narrowing that gap between modeled and actual energy performance. And I wondered if that was something that was convincing to you as well.
Very much, yeah. We're a publicly listed company, so we're quoted on the stock exchange, and we have to publish a range of non-financial information as well as our financial information every year. And one of the key pieces of data that we have to report is our carbon footprint annually. So it's X number of tons of carbon that we have used each year, and we have to account for that performance gap that you just described there now in our carbon reporting. It's not enough for us to say our building energy rating certificates or our EPCs, the energy performance certificates, they say that the houses are going to perform to X standard and therefore that's what we're going to report. No, we have to then account for the lag in performance, in real world performance. And at the moment, on the basis of an academic study that was done here, we apply a 39% penalty to the predicted performance of all of the non-passive homes that we're building. So it's a sizable chunk every year, which again, that was a big factor in that we considered when going to passive, is that we could wipe out that 39% simply by applying a more accurate modeling standard.
That's really interesting. Wow, it makes me really wish that the production builders in this country had to live with that kind of reporting detail. But because of that change, I understand that Cairn is strongly committed to the Passive House standard and using this approach in all of its new builds. Is that correct? And how is that being played out in practice?
Yeah, so we have one of the things I always say about this is that if Passive House was just about reducing your carbon footprint, we would probably have done one or two pilot projects at this point. We might be a lot more knowledgeable about Passive House, but I don't know that we would have jumped into it to the extent that we have now if it wasn't for the fact that there are huge direct benefits to our customers and to the residents of the homes. It's Our CEO scolded me at one point during the meeting saying, "Stop talking about carbon. This is about the people living in our homes. It's about the money in their pockets. It's about the comfort in their homes. It's about fresh air. It's about energy poverty. It's about all of those really tangible benefits. Not that carbon isn't important, but I don't think we would have 1,750 plus units under construction to the Passive House standard now if it wasn't for the fact that our customers are going to see and feel the benefits. So we went almost from a standing start to building to the Passive House standard on 4 sites pretty much simultaneously. We haven't completed any Passive House units yet. So we really have jumped in feet first. And the customers are really excited. As it happens, all 4 of the sites that we've started Passive House on, they will be for social and affordable or cost rental homes. A real mixed tenure. This isn't high-end €1 million or $1 million apartments in posh areas in the city. These are units going to people for whom energy bills are something that they really need to take seriously. They're also, just as a sidebar, each of the 4 sites will achieve biodiversity net gain. So the ecology on the sites is going to be in a better state when we finish than when we started. They're in places with good public transport links, and then we are getting them certified to the Irish Green Building Council's Home Performance Index standard as well, which is, it's a very much holistic in the round view of sustainability. It's not just about energy efficiency. We had a conference here in Dublin in May, called the ZEB Summit, the Zero Emission Buildings Summit. And we had some visitors to the site, some delegates from the conferences, including some from the States. And it was a real moment of pride to be showing these international people around the sites. And sorry, let me clarify, I wasn't showing anybody around the sites. The people working on the sites were the ones showing us around, and hearing the way they were talking about their work and their pride in their achievements, and hearing a site foreman speak for 10 or 15 minutes uninterrupted about airtightness and the importance of quality control and how he was managing that, and they're having good-natured competitions between the different foremen to see who can get the best airtightness test results in their particular block or whatever it is. They've fully embraced this challenge. And that site in particular, that's one where we bought the site with a fully realized design on it. There was a full set of tender documents when we purchased it. So we're effectively retrofitting a new building to be passive. We've had to change and alter the design in order to meet the standard. We couldn't have made it any more difficult for ourselves if we had tried. But these guys have they've tackled it head on, and so far they're knocking it out of the park.
Oh, that's so exciting. There's so much of what you said I would just want to jump into a little bit more deeply, because it's just such exciting news. So I'm just curious, is the site that you were just talking about, is it near Dublin or part of Dublin?
Yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you said that how altogether was it 1,700 units that you're working?
1,750. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, that's a very large number to jump into with both feet, to a new approach. And trying to redesign a current design to it is pretty amazing. So does that mean, in order to get the construction teams that you're working with, and are these construction teams, are they all part of Cairn Homes, or are they subcontractors?
Subcontractors. Cairn Homes, just to give an idea of scale there, we employ about 500 people directly in Cairn, but there's probably 10 times that number in subcontractors building all of the developments that we're live on. I think it's 21 sites at the moment.
Wow.
So 4 of them are passive, and there's another 16 or whatever that is in train at the moment. But there are 5,000 people, roughly speaking, who are going to, before long, have had some experience of being on a passive house site. And that kind of, again, I talked about the compounding effect earlier on. I think, and I would hope, that there's going to be a compounding effect, something similar to that within the construction industry workforce, that when those subcontractors go to other sites, that they'll take some of that knowledge and some of those learnings with them. Yeah.
How do you train that level of people? I mean, how did you manage that? How does Cairn do that?
I suppose the main focus for our training has been on our own staff. So key people in key roles across those sites and within our technical department in our central office, they have gone through passive house training. Some have become certified passive house designers or consultants. Others have just done, like our services engineers, our mechanical and electrical engineers would have done a focused course which concentrated on the services only. They didn't get involved too deeply in discussions about form factor or orientation or whatever. They did what they had to do. So we've had a few different tailored training programs for our own people. And at that point, then it has been down to individual sites, and they will have toolbox talks with their subcontractors or when the subcontractors are tendering for the air tightness work for these projects, they're aware that this is being done to passive house standard. It's something that most of them, if not all of them, have done at some point in their career, but it's probably at a much smaller scale. They're aware of what is required, just maybe not too experienced in applying it to this sort of scale. But so far, with that focus, some of the air tightness results have been brilliant. Like the best that I've heard so far is 0.22 ACH for that was for, I think, a single floor of an apartment block. But yeah, I think if they keep going on that kind of trajectory, they won't have any problem with achieving the standard.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations. And I just want to touch for a minute on the climate there and why thinking about the passive house standard is important for you guys, because it's not like you have extreme cold or extreme heat,
True.
but you do have other weather related challenges.
Yeah, one of the things we have a lot of is moisture. And again, that fact which seemed a bit startling at the time that I learned when I first learned about passive house, that the air tightness requirement isn't so much an energy saving feature as it is a building fabric protection feature. If you stop the air leakage into the fabric, then you are prolonging the life of your building. So dealing with the problems of moisture within the buildings, dealing with mold, dealing with exposure to high wind, we do have a milder climate than most other places, but we are starting now to see overheating becoming an issue that if it's not very onerous at the moment, we can see the direction of travel and we know what way things are going. There have been court cases here in the country with recently constructed high value developments and the apartments are virtually uninhabitable due to overheating. So it's becoming an issue everywhere. And we're not a country where active cooling is a normal part of a residential building. It's very few homes in Ireland would have aircon. It's quite common in commercial and retail spaces, but not in residential. So that's not something we plan for either.
And since you brought up active cooling, do your developments provide that? Are you using heat pumps, for instance, that can do both heating and cooling for your mechanical systems? Or
not at present. We do use some heat pumps, but we haven't as of yet. And look, it's everything. We're always considering everything. As of yet, no, we haven't used heat pumps in that manner that we'd be drawing heat out of the units.
Uh-huh. And generally speaking, do you have a mechanical system approach that you could tell us about that usually you use?
Yeah. So sorry. If I can talk about the non-passive and then the passive approaches. For our standard non-passive units, we do use heat pumps. They're generally exhaust air heat pumps that we're using. So it's taking the air from within the units and using that to drive the compressor. For the passive house units, all of them at the moment are using heat pumps to heat the hot water only, and we're using direct electric for the space heating. And that's a kind of that's twofold. One is that we wanted to make the transition to this new type of technology or new type of dwelling as seamless as possible. And we felt that if we could put an electric radiator in every room, in every apartment, that there would be a sort of a psychological comfort for the residents in that they would instinctively know, okay, if I'm feeling a bit cold, that's where I go to turn it up to give myself a bit of heat. We just weren't, we were a bit reluctant to go down. Oh, yeah, sorry. Another thing that we don't use an awful lot in this country is air as the medium for transporting heat around. It's not the norm. We would normally have wet radiators, so we'd have a hot water pipe work running around the apartment, heating radiators. So this was a middle ground between the two, that you can see where your radiator is. You can tell by the light whether it's on or off. You can twist the dial if you want to turn it up a bit. We're probably over providing radiators. We'll have probably 4 or 5, depending on the size of the apartment, when actually one would probably be sufficient to meet the demand. But yeah, we figured that'd be a good way of gently introducing people to this new way of living.
And also, again, going back to the not extreme temperatures that you have in your country, that in a way, I'm just thinking that in a way, not having a heat pump and not having to use the refrigerant that all the heat pumps require, direct electric heating that you're not going to need that much of because you have a great building envelope, is probably more sustainable in some ways. Yes.
Yeah, and going back to the carbon discussion, moving from the heat pumps we most recently used, which, don't ask me now the name of the refrigerant, but it was using a particular refrigerant which had quite a high global warming potential. Now we're using much smaller heat pumps with a small amount of refrigerant which has a low GWP. So if you just take that refrigerant number in isolation, the amount of embodied carbon in the refrigerant has gone down by 90% between our old way of doing it and the new way of doing it. So that's been good.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to go back briefly. You talked about biodiversity improving on the sites that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you plan for that?
Look, it's a range of things. We use the Natural England metric. There isn't currently a way of, or an agreed national metric for measuring biodiversity in Ireland. So we use our neighbours' system of doing it. So we send in ecologists onto the site before we start our work, and they do their surveys and they do their measurements, and the metric, there's a matrix there, and you fill in the different types of habitat units and the areas of each, and that gives us a baseline then that we are working to. And then our landscape plans then are designed with that baseline in mind, and what you're seeking to do is that you are leaving the site a minimum of 10% better than that baseline figure. So for us, the main things that we would use a lot of nature-based surface water management systems, rather than putting in concrete drainage pipes or whatever it is. That we're putting in as many natural surfaces as we can, just to attenuate and slow down the rainwater exiting the site. And then it would be, not now for these particular developments because they're all high density apartment developments, but in our low density housing ones, every house gets a fruit tree in their garden. For these apartments, there will be green roofs on the apartments. It's trying to make space for nature everywhere we can, really, within the developments.
Oh, that's so great to hear about. And I understand, in addition to all this work you're doing with Cairn, that you're on the board of the Passive House Association of Ireland. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah.
And you're working with the Passive House Trust in the UK to put on a conference in October, right?
Yes, yes.
And can you tell us a little bit about the conference? And it's something that, I'm sure anybody in the neighborhood should be looking forward to.
Yeah. Look, we really enjoy working with the Passive House Trust in the UK. They're a great organization. Like, Their education resources are, I think, fantastic, especially when it comes to the kind of large scale passive house projects that we're involved with now. Some of their master classes on those sorts of subjects have been brilliant. Yeah, their conference has been really the premier passive house community event in the UK for the last 10 years or so. And because there's been so much activity in Northern Ireland in the passive house space between education buildings or student accommodation or whatever it may be, there's a good few private home developments under development at the moment. The Passive House Trust decided that they'd come over to Belfast for their conference. We then decided to make it an all-island conference, so it's going to be joint between the two organisations. Everyone felt the time was right. And yeah, I'd encourage anyone from further afield. It doesn't need to be from the UK or from Ireland. Anybody who wants to make the trip from further afield, I think there'll be great learnings.
Yeah, I know. I was lucky enough to go last year to the conference, and as you say, just really great educational programming there.
Yeah.
One last question I wanted to ask you about is, when you talk about the passive house and the customers in Ireland, do they appreciate what passive house means? How well known is the concept of passive house now in the general home buying market there?
I would say everybody knows the myths about passive house. I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest, how well anyone understands it, or at least the general public understand it. And that's been part of the challenge that we've taken on. Is we've decided to jump into this with both feet. We need to educate the public about what it is that we are producing, and to stimulate then the demand from them that they want more and more of this. All of our customers for these first four developments are, if you like, professional housing bodies. And yes, they have an understanding. They're very motivated and very happy to be getting buildings of this standard. But we still have a bit of work to do until Joe Public understands and has the same, or feels that they are entitled to ask for buildings of this standard. That it's not just for some sort of an elite band of clients who are A, very motivated, B, that they're aware and see that they have deep pockets and they're able to pay a premium for buildings of high standard. All buildings should be produced to this standard. There's nothing elitist about passive house, or there should be nothing elitist about passive house. Everybody should have a right and an expectation that their home is going to be performing to the standard to which it has been designed.
That's such a great note to end on, but I have to ask you one last thing that I was thinking about, which is we may have left the listeners with slightly mistaken impression. What % of your developments are social housing versus market rate housing?
It varies from year to year. So at the moment, there's a lot of focus at government level in Ireland where they want to stimulate the construction of social and affordable housing, particularly high density in areas of need. So we're in the middle of, how would you say, a sort of a phase in the market where that is a considerable percentage. But our normal would probably be 50-50 split, something like that. 50% would be for private sale and 50% would be through one route or another, going to either cost rental or social and affordable, something like that.
Okay, great. And then one last question about, for market rate housing, are there you said the Irish government is supportive of good quality housing being produced. Are there any financing opportunities for home buyers wanting to purchase passive house housing?
Yes, I believe, one of the pillar banks here is, if they haven't come out with a passive house product, I believe that it's in the works. We don't have a huge amount of competition in the banking sector here. We could probably do with more, but there are moves being made in the space of green mortgages, green loans, that sort of thing.
Maybe we'll get to hear more about that at the conference in October.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. It's really exciting to hear about the work you're doing. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Mary.
And that was Stephen O'Shea of Cairn Homes. Thank you very much for that, Mary. You just beat me to it, because I was also really keen to talk to Cairn after looking at some of the great work that they've been involved in. So I'm really glad that you got to speak to Stephen. What were the highlights for you?
Well, first it's just the overall, it's great to talk to a company that's taking Passive House so seriously, and in a country where taking Passive House seriously is working out for them economically. So, I just really appreciate that, given the current political climate here, where I think Passive House is having a little more of a uphill battle at this, or at least anything to do with efficiency is having
Yeah.
an uphill battle. So it's just, I really appreciate that. And the fact that I loved, he said that when he came to Cairn, he rolled up his sleeves for a battle, and it turned out it was like pushing an open door. I just really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it does sound like as he mentioned, they've jumped in boots and all, and have seemed to have found pretty fertile ground despite the challenging time that they started. The company started with a bit of a downturn, which is something that we've heard quite quite frequently on the show, that sort of people have used that opportunity in the past to really think about what direction that they want to springboard from. And Cairn Homes has certainly done that. Zach, what were the highlights for you?
Well, I was, coming on the heels of the presentation that Tomas O'Leary also just made in the Reimagined Buildings Collective. There was a great interview with Tomas and Michael. It's just really inspiring to see the kind of change that's happening and the momentum that's happening there. And this is something that you can chart back to partly to Tomas's work. He was the first. He did the first Passive House project in the English-speaking world in 2004, and he still lives in that house. And then he's been, beating the drum for Passive House around the world, and also a lot in Ireland and also the UK and beyond for years. And I imagine that Steve, Stephen O'Shea probably heard about Passive House from Tomas, and then he went through that process of maybe like skepticism. He described that skepticism, and then learning about that Passive House is such a great solution via his study of energy efficiency. So just it's this culmination of the work by so many different people that is now making a really big impact. I mean, and
Yeah.
pretty cool to see that 1,750 units underway, and they haven't finished they're all in before having done one.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
shows that there's this proof of concept out there that really serious companies, publicly listed companies, can rest assured that this is a tried and true approach to achieving efficiency, to savings. And it's not just carbon; it's savings for people, fresh air, energy poverty. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that sentiment about, the carbon's great, but it's not about the carbon, it's about the people. And whenever I hear about people really making a difference to fuel poverty, I just think that that's a great thing to be doing. It sucks that that's the reality for a lot of people, but amazing that Passive House can be an affordable, viable option for providing social housing and addressing some of those health issues. And just creating really great spaces for people. And on top of that, really interesting to hear about the biodiversity net gains. That is pretty massive. That's getting into the realm of living building challenge when you're actually improving the natural environment by virtue of the buildings being there instead of them just being less bad. That's the ultimate, I think, in terms of really enhancing an environment with a project rather than just trying to make it not as bad as it would otherwise be. So to be extending beyond passive house and looking at those sort of biodiversity and other wider environmental impacts, I think is super impressive. And to be doing all of that in the context of affordable social housing kind of just reiterates again that there isn't really any excuse for not doing buildings of this sort of level for any development. I mean, if it can be done affordably for this type of project, then it should be able to be done anywhere. So really great. Just a whole bunch of really great stuff and a really great success story. Any closing thoughts from you, Mary?
Well, just the reach of their projects. I mean, it's really great that they're doing 1,700 passive house projects, but I was really impressed that they have 500 people working directly in Cairn, and then he said probably 10 times that number in subcontractors. So the ripple effect from the past, all those people are going to be learning about passive house and their role in implementing passive house to one extent or another. And I just think that's great. It's a powerful tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's some really great stuff. And you mentioned the conference there. There's a really great collaboration between Passive House Ireland and Passive House Trust. And this is one example of why that's a really interesting space to be looking at right now with some of the great stuff I think that's going on in that part of the world, which, as you said at the top, Mary, it's really great to hear a positive story. I know things are can seem a bit down with challenging policies elsewhere in the world. So it's really great to see what's happening successfully in the UK and Ireland. Well, thank you very much for that, Mary. Zach, what have we got coming up on the accelerator and also in Reimagine?
Well, the accelerator will be firing up is 2025-2026 Passive House Accelerator live season at the beginning of September. So we'll be unveiling a lot of details around that very soon. In the meantime, within the Reimagine Buildings Collective, we have a Reimagine Tuesday every Tuesday and an Ask Me Anything Friday every Friday. So we are bringing in experts and residents to share their insights and to provide face-to-face interaction with members in these kind of a smaller group setting. It's been a lot of fun. So we have a Reimagine special happening on Tuesday, August 12th with Andrew Peel, who is the owner and principal of Peel Passive House. And then on August 19th, we have a Reimagine Materials episode with Lindsay Love, who's the owner of Regenerative Building Solutions. And both of those are fireside chats with Michael Ingwe, the founder of Passive House Accelerator, followed by discussion with members of the collective. So lots of fun stuff.
Awesome. Lots going on. Well, tune into all of that. Check it all out over at the Accelerator and of course in Reimagine Buildings. And we'll be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.